Awesome. So it's top of the hour, so I thought I'd kick off. It's very interesting being in a room this full. Usually it ends with, we, the jury, find the defendant. But we'll try to go from there. Also, I should stay closer to this. So to kick things off, I'm Ryan Nolette. I'm currently the security technologist at Squirrel. If you've never heard that title, neither have I. It basically means I'm an internal security consultant or security guard, cleaner of waste, SVP, volcano taming, whatever you'd like. Last 15 years, I've been doing incident response and forensics. And now I've kind of moved into more blue teaming and threat hunting and try to do a more proactive approach. Things that we're going to talk about are mainly lateral movement and why it's important. A really great analogy is obviously the football running back, right? What are you trying to get through? You're trying to get through the defense that's static. To go into lateral movement. So I want to work off of one definition. There's a bunch of different definitions for lateral movement. The one I'm working with is mostly the MITRE definition, where things that are commonly overlooked is that it's not the end goal of the attacker. All right, lateral movement is just a step in the process in order to get to the money. There's a bunch of different types, right? We've all seen on the news, shared web root, things running as the same permissions as your web server, SQL injection to get processor binaries running on systems to move across and execute into their privileged state and things along those lines. I'm going to work with two during this. The first one is going to be a remote access tool, and the second one is going to be pass the hash. So this is me showing the offensive side. Aw, that's so sweet. This is actually warmer than, I probably shouldn't say that on video. This one's for Grandma. Wow, that... Well, I will say it's better than the Montreal Canadiens. Moving on, now to the technical portion. Some of the things that I want to go over is a rough demonstration of what lateral movement is, right? Very simplified network diagram. You have multiple hosts. Those hosts are VLAN'd out, so only certain ones have access to other VLANs. So our little hacker is going to start on a compromised system. They're going to try and get to the money, basically where the credentials of the finance are. They're going to find another guy in their VLAN. Neither one of them can make it. Lo and behold, they find a system that they can access, which gets you to the goal. And now you kind of have your nice little victory dance, right? And then stage 3 is always profit, right? What is the core you're going to buy? He's going to, right? He's going to lay out that money and he's going to upgrade his car. And there was bourbon involved, okay? Which also leads me to my next slide of the attacker personal life cycle. He starts off in his little, Pinto 1984 Honda, and he's going to make some quick money, right? He's going to be a kiddie, little script kiddie and get some fast cash. Then he's going to upgrade his car. He's going to forget to pay his taxes, and he's going to get Al Caponed and into prison. Rinse and repeat, right? That's kind of the life cycle of what we see at a lot of attackers, right? In the news, we always see, Eastern European hacker gets arrested and the guy owns 10 Ferraris, as if that wasn't going to give him away, right? But what matters is the lateral movement process, right? There's 5 key stages to it, and how I'd like to put them out is, the first one is infection, right? This is what I call can scripts or can corgis, right? These are the pre-existing things that somebody can just pop open. This is, buying your exploit kit. This is, buying something that's pre-configured where it's just malware as a service. You're just trying to get onto that system via an exploit. The next one up, I'm calling the Corgi Russian hacks, because it's basically where the attacker now has actual access to the system. So in the example I'll be showing you is, this is a infected system. The user ran a binary, and basically it created a reverse TCP connection out, which then gives me a meta interpreter shell. In the real world, this is a CNC server that's basically just listening for phone home attempts from the infected system, that then the attacker can manually get on whenever he feels like, and either run pre-configured scripts or actually manually go on and start searching. Which leads me to Detective Corgi, because Corgi theft is not something you want to Google, and so I'm sticking with the Sherlock Holmes Corgi on this one for finding shit. This is where the guy's actually doing reconnaissance. And I'll bring you through a bunch of the different reconnaissance, but mainly I'm looking for, what systems I can connect to, what users are on this system, mounted drives, things that I can use and abuse to further my goal and eventually make my way to where the money is. The next one up is, I don't have a good term for it, password Corgi. If anyone's got a better name, let me know. We'll patent that shit. But this is going to be credential theft. In this case, I'm just using Mimikatz. It's simple, it's easy. Most systems let it run for some reason. And then finally, lateral movement. This is where the attacker gets really freaking excited, right? Because now you've already mapped out where you want to go next. You now have credentials that you could possibly log into these other systems for. Now it's time to make an engineer or IT admin cry, because now you're going to start moving across their environment. What you're seeing here is something that I've cut out major components of because I don't feel like getting sued. This is me creating a backdoored putty executable. All I'm doing is I'm tossing the reverse shell into it pretty much and just having it phone home when it's run. Very simple. I figure if you already know how to do this step, it doesn't matter about the rest of the stuff I'm going to show you, because you probably already do it. But for those of you that this is the first time seeing somebody create a backdoored executable, you are missing components. Totally upfront about that. OJ's lawyer is no longer available, so it's kind of quiet now. What we're going to see is I just renamed it. Originally I called it badguy.exe just for simplicity. I renamed it to putty.exe because that's what I'm actually going to toss up on, compromised website, whether it's your CNET or SourceForge or whatever. I can just throw it up there and people are going to download it because they click on the first thing that's available on Google results. Once it's run, I'm going to get my MetaInterpreter session. So what I've done here is, this is all manual right now. In real world with your CNC infrastructure, this is all automated. But to kind of show you the steps, this is me waiting and listening for this connection to come home. God, that's smearing off. This is kind of listening and waiting for something unique to come in, right? What I can do from here is now I can have a direct shell to it. I can either run MetaInterpreter directly, which allows me to use all of the existing plugins and exploits, bypasses, whatever that's already loaded in, or I can do a direct shell and run native, commands for whatever OS it is. In this case, it's Windows, and it's Windows 7. The system itself I chose is only Service Pack 1 because I wanted to use an exploit that I know is patched. So if somebody tries to repeat this, they can't in the wild, unless you're in the government, financial firm, healthcare, or some other person that forgets to patch. Moving on, once again, OJ's lawyer is not available. What we're going to do is, now that the malicious binary has been executed and the connection is set up, we're going to start poking around. So first thing I want to do when I get on this host is, what privileges do I have? Am I just in the user space? Am I a local admin? Am I domain admin? What can I do? What we see here is this company has a good practice. All the users are not local admins. They are just regular standard users with nothing fancy. That's great for that company, but terrible for me as an attacker because I really want privilege. I want to be able to use and abuse this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a UAC bypass. That's your user access control. For those of you who don't know, when you run, I think everything past like Vista's last patch or whatever, it's that annoying pop-up that you get when you try to execute something and it says, do you want to run this in a higher privilege level? Sorry. And and you have to click OK, and then it allows you to execute that binary. So that's going to stop me from actually executing things. Sorry, the microphone has performance anxiety. Stay. I swear this has never happened before. Sober. And what we're going to do from here is we're going to kind of use and abuse that system. There's a very commonly known UAC bypass that you can do directly from MetaInterpreter. And what I'm doing is I'm using that initial session that's unprivileged, and I'm kind of piggybacking on that and initiating a second session that uses this UAC bypass. And what that's going to do is when that session connects and successfully exploits UAC, I'm going to now have increased privileges. So on the left, you see before I did my bypass, and on the right, you see after I did my bypass. This is kind of what I call the pissed list, because the longer it is, the madder you'll get as a blue teamer. And this is not something that you really want to see in your environment happening. Totally things that you can prevent, and we'll go over a couple of them towards the end. Lastly, at the bottom, we're going to see one of my nifty tricks. This is me moving from one process to another. The process that you see in the image here is just notepad.exe, and the reason I chose that is because the Windows 7 system I'm on is 64-bit. If I am currently in a 32-bit application, elevating privilege and running other malicious commands are significantly more difficult. So I want to go into a 64-bit process to fully take advantage of things on the system. The reason why you see this one in the image is because this actually pops up a notepad window. So if you try to repeat this, they're going to know. What I actually do is I go into something that doesn't have a window and is a 64-bit process. Dealer's choice. Hashtag please don't sue me is what I'm going to go with. Next up, now I have admin on this system. I can start poking around and running some system commands. I want to find out users. Who am I going to impersonate today, and what privileges do they have? So I'm going to search for two different types of users. I want to see local users, and I want to see domain users. Now, the reason why I want the local users is because in every single large corporation, IT has a backdoor local admin account that uses the same goddamn password across like 10,000 systems. For the record, GPO allows you to randomize that password for every system and stores it in AD. So there's really no excuse for this anymore for this practice whatsoever. There are no arguments against that. It's just stupid to have it otherwise. Next up is the domain accounts. Now, these are accounts that I know authenticate to AD. They're going to allow me to log into systems, and if there's roaming profiles turned on and things like that, it's going to allow me to move throughout the environment. Also, we're going to try and look for usernames that don't meet the standard naming convention of the others. What you see here are a couple users that are like first initial, last name, and then you see, master underscore A. So this I've seen as a huge common practice for like domain admin or system admin level AD accounts. So that's going to be something that I really want to try and take advantage of. Next up is some more reconnaissance. So this is me trying to find out who am I, where am I, and where can I go. This is, IP config. what are my IP addresses? What's the gateway? What kind of VLAN am I on? The length of the subnet block, all that kind of stuff. I'm also going to look for mounted drives because those are great for moving laterally through. That corporate NAS that you have, most likely it's set up so everyone can read and write to a lot of directories. Now I can put my backdoored malware right up there and see where else and who else decides to download it and run it. And finally, we're going to check out the ARP table. This is going to matter because this tells me who my computer's already been talking to. So if a user is constantly plugging in their Ethernet cable at their desk and then they walk around to a meeting and they're on Wi-Fi, they're talking to different systems, and unless you have some kind of network access control or microsegmentation going on, you're going to be able to talk to multiple different systems and the different ways to connect to the network. This is awesome because when you go back to the Ethernet connection, because it's already in your ARP table, you also most likely have a route to it. So now you can move across the VLANs, and unless there's something explicit put there to stop you from doing it, now you have some more fun. Next up are interesting things like what processes are you running, what processes have network connections, and then finally doing some end mapping for systems. Why this matters is, first of all, the things in red on the left image, those are the malicious binaries. So you have your badguy.exe running, and you have the notepad.exe running where the parent PID of the notepad is badguy.exe. So this is a way for you as a blue team to see what's the lineage of the execution chain from the running binary all the way up through its parent process, grandparent process, yada yada, all the way up to the initiating process. This matters because when I go over to my network connections and I see which of the processes have active running network connections, that tells me processes that I want to move into. Rather than going into notepad.exe, I want to go into, iExplorer or something, because when the response team or SOC team is going to go and look at the system, things low on their list to look at are network connections from processes that should have network connections. I'm not using calculator.exe to, outsource my math homework to Russia. I'm trying to use Internet Explorer to surf the web. Now, part of the previous network mapping is I'm going to look for specific attributes of the other systems in the environment. The subnet that I'm going to end up scanning is going to be directly related to what I saw in my ARP table in my IP config. Because if I'm in a /24/16, I want to know that so I can scan against it. But what I really want to look for are what systems are there that have very specific open ports, right? In this case, I'm looking for SMB ports. 139 is, I think you call it NBT over IP. It's like NetBIOS, and it's associated with SMB connections. 445 is another one. It's SMB over IP, which is what I'm going to abuse for my remote access tool. This remote access tool is going to be psexec. So who's used psexec? Good. SecOps hates all of you because that's a legitimate access tool for support for IT and is constantly run throughout environments and being abused. I use some whitelisting software, and I block psexec from installing a service or running from any account except very specific IT accounts. You can use AppLocker for that, or you can use a more commercial tool for whitelisting to do that. And the reason for that is I only want very specific people to be able to remotely access other systems and execute code, actually get a full shell on that system, and things like that. Next up, now that I have, I've infected the system, I'm now an admin, I've looked and see what users are near me, systems that are near me, and then following that, we're going to start trying to poke at these systems, and we know which ones are open. So I'm excited. I know things that I'm going to attack. I've prioritized them. I'm going to go after this one first. How am I going to access that system? I'm going to dump the credentials, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use the Mimikatz plugin because it's easy, it exists already, and I'm lazy. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dump the Kerberos hashes, which, fun story, comes out in clear text, both username and password. And the next one, I'm going to dump the SAM hashes, and then LTMM, NT, those hashes. Sober. We're going to dump all of that and basically see what hashes exist and what clear text passwords exist. Now, the difference there is I prefer to do pass the hash if possible, because you can add a couple different flags to it to make it look more legitimate. If you're using the plain text credentials in PSExec, you're actually sending those credentials in clear text across, which is something you can look for on your network. Are credentials in clear text going across the network? If so, something is improperly configured or something very suspicious is happening. Same kind of idea if you ever see PowerShell with encoded strings, that kind of stuff. All right, now I have the stolen credentials, I have my target, and now I'm going to own it. I'm just going to use the PSExec plugin, and I'm going to give it the username and the hash for that, the password hash for it, and I'm successfully connected. Now you'll see I have 3 sessions. I have my initial infection session, which is the guy clicking on the backdoor putty. I have the second session, which is my UAC bypass that I'm now a local admin in. And now I have a third session, which is the newly owned system using the credentials that I pulled off of that infected system. I have now officially moved laterally one system. It's one system. I might still be stuck in the same subnet. I might not. This is where things that I've cut out of the presentation, like adding routing through your infected session, comes in, because what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to do further attacks against systems that only that system can see. So from my initial infection system, I've owned a second one. I create routing here. And what that routing is going to allow me to do is when I go and do end mapping, it's not going to come from the initial infection system. It's going to come from that the lateral movement infected system. It's not infected. It's compromised, owned, whatever you want to call it, system. And that's where the network traffic is actually going to come out at and do the end mapping scan. It's a great way to kind of hide that you're doing something terrible from that initial infection. And if anything, people are going to think that second system's infected and wipe that one rather than your foothold. Please don't sue me. Cool. So, detecting lateral movement. We talked about some of the foundation. We went over the offensive side, which is something that really greatly interests me as a defensive guy, because in a lot of presentations, you don't get to see the offense side, right? All they get to see are the after effects of what they did, right? They moved laterally. Great, now I have a new process on this system. But what did they actually do in order to do that? Because if I can figure out what the attacker is doing, I can try to move further up the attack chain and stop them there, right? So detecting lateral movement, it's hard. There's always a relevant XKCD, and this one is no exception. I make no hiding of how much I detest NGAV as a term or other automated methods of detection. And the reason for that is, right now, detecting things is really more art than science. You have to have experience at looking for things to try and get a hint of, this is something that's bad and I should probably go poke at it or look at it. And it's really hard to automate that stuff in the current languages. If people are being successful at it, point me to your GitHub. I'd love to see what you're working on and help out where I can. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to specifically look at not exactly IOCs, but probably closer to what's defined as TTPs. I'm going to look for a bunch of things that are further up the kill chain. So rather than looking for a hash on a system, I'm going to mine your Windows events. So these are login events. These are events that kind of show different failed logins and stuff. If you guys are already collecting logs and you're in a SOC, you probably get a whole lot of messages about failed logins, right? Because that tells you, was somebody trying to brute force it? Did, Bob try to change Jack's password for him in that context? All those things. But very few IT departments or security departments actually monitor and care about successful logins. Those are very valuable events that you want to look for because they're indicative of somebody successfully accessed the system. Why do you care? Well, was it a legitimate access or is it illegitimate? And if you're not collecting those logs and putting them into your SIM for correlation or trying to do some of that proactive hunting for these things, you are going to have a bad time, right? You're going to miss a ton of lateral movement. You're going to miss compromise attempts, and you're going to miss that second stage of me moving laterally to a system, which also doesn't have access to where I want to go, and then trying again through another system, and trying again through another system, and so on and so forth until I find what I want. Those are very important things to look for. So, a couple of different ways to detect what I just did. I'm going to give you 3. The first one is going to be your indicator search, right? This is what I consider level 1 hunting. All right, everybody defines threat hunting differently. I don't think that threat hunting needs to be extremely advanced for people. Having your tier 1 analysts doing IOC searches or mining threat intelligence PDFs and searching for those kind of IOCs, totally acceptable, right? That is helping people find stuff. They try to figure out what's applicable. It helps your tier 1 analysts learn about your environment and learn about the threat landscape going against you. Bump up to the next tier and you're looking at IDS alerts. Snort already has an alert for PSExec activity. Use that. The tier 2 analysts are going to be the guys that are trying to check out IDS signatures, upgrading the security stack, checking on things, helping out the tier 1, seeing what they're learning, and try to incorporate that stuff as they go up. Then we have what I'm going to consider the tier 3 analysts, the more advanced guys. We're going to use a bro script. The reason why I consider this more advanced is bro scripting's hard. I think Chris Sanders is doing a wonderful class on learning to bro script, so definitely check that out. It's extremely valuable because you can customize pretty much anything you want to see through like 50 different data types that bro acknowledges going across the wire. It's one of my favorite tools right now. And, I'd use it through Security Onion most of the time, but you can still configure it and you can run it standalone. The reason why I consider it a little bit more advanced is because now I'm putting in very specific things about the traffic, right? In this case, I'm looking for any kind of traffic that's using admin shares. So admin shares here are, C $, your admin $, or your IPC $. Those are things that I really don't want to see going across my network traffic because those are indicative of somebody using PSExec and trying to connect to and abuse admin shares, which Windows has, on by default. Some other techniques, stat counting. So as I went through and kind of talked about, the successful logins that you want to look at and you want to better keep track of. Here's an example of one of the events. This is your, I think it's 4624. Yeah, this is your successful Windows login. Why does this matter? Well, when I do a stat count and I grab all my logins, all the different Windows events that are either failed, successful, etc., and I start counting them, those numbers matter because the things that happen least often are things that I probably want to check first. It's not happening often in my environment. Why did this happen? Once you can kind of acknowledge that and figure out what happened, you can start kind of clearing that out of, well, I don't care about this event anymore. Let's tune it out. And then get more and more into the more complicated things in order to drill down more. For the 4624 event, I use the actual ID as the initial indicator, and then I have a bunch of extra conditionals that are attributes of that event that I'm looking for. I want to see what the system was, the user that actually tried to log in, and then the user account that they used to try and log in. If those two things don't match, kind of sad. You want to kind of look at that stuff and go forward. So that's kind of more of the SOC analyst, more reactive security. That's you setting up your SIM rules. That's you doing your IDS signature updates. That's the standard practice for probably the last 10 plus years, right? What people are kind of moving towards, and what I've fully embraced at this point, is more of a proactive threat hunting approach. And that's not just because it's, the new hot word of the day. It's more because I consider it the next iteration. So we talked, tier 1 analysts are the guys doing your IOC searches. Tier 2 are the guys helping, update your standard security stack. Tier 3 is doing the more advanced stuff. They're the guys playing around with, Elastic Stack to try and match things. They're creating the bro scripts, etc. Where do those guys go from there? Well, I see kind of like the next tier up are the guys that are doing the proactive threat hunting. The things that you're not commonly looking for and trying to dig in and find the stuff. So what I want to walk you through is like my 4-part process. This is what I teach to analysts right now, this 4-part process. And this is broken down for this specific attack. Now, because I have this way too small on the screen, what we're going to go to is the hypothesis. So when I see threat hunting talks, I commonly see people go, I'm here to find evil. That's not how I define threat hunting. To me, threat hunting is the validation of a hypothesis. Whether or not I find something malicious doesn't matter to me. It's about the validation of the hunt. I am stating, I believe that attackers are abusing PS exec for lateral movement. That is what I want to validate. I want to go through all my logs. I want to hunt for specific attributes of PSX usage, of lateral movement usage, and all these other attributes. And I want to say 100% black and white. Yes, somebody has done this, or no, somebody has not done this. To me, that is the threat hunt. It is the validation of that hypothesis. And the reason why I find that important is because that's a repeatable process. When you're trying to sell, to your upper management what you want to do, you always have to use the businessy terms: return on investment, high value target, synergy, whatever kind of term you feel like using that day. You have to, in order to be a very successful security practitioner, you have to know why the business gives a shit, because they're paying you, right? Security is not a moneymaker. It is always a cost center. You are always going to affect your business's bottom line. How to change that kind of view in your upper management is to show them return on investment. By spending a few hours looking for all this stuff, I've just saved us a few $1 million, right? We are not the next guy in the news because I've already gone and looked for this and found it before it became a problem. It's the I'm not going to name names of companies. We all know who's in the news right now. But, doing these proactive things, you can find stuff earlier on. By doing these different tiers, you're able to look for the known bad that's complicated to find, and then the unknown bad, the things that people are trying to try now. And it allows you to take that information and put it into your proactive detection model, right? The whole point of these different tiers is to be a circle. You're trying to combine disparate data sets, right? You are trying to start that full cycle. When something gets escalated from tier 1 to tier 2, it's their job to validate those findings, not find evil, validate what came up to them. Is this a true positive or false positive? Same thing for the next tier up, tier 3. Is this false positive or a true positive? And then up to the threat hunting, where they're kind of more or less defining their own stuff of true positive and false positive. Then you take your findings and you bring them back to tier 1. And tier 1 is then going to go and try and validate your findings, because as part of the threat hunt, you've documented your stuff, right? You've commented your code. You've done all this work at a higher level, which then they can see work with, and then learn from, which will help build them up to the tier 2 and eventually continue that cycle going through. And that part of the iterative process is extremely valuable, and it shows the return on investment to your bosses. And it's kind of what helps me cut paychecks to the people that I have coming in. The problem with trying to create relationships between disparate data sets is that they're all different. So we have to find the common fields between them and connect them. In this example, these 3 sets I'm using because I used a PS exec attack. So I have network traffic between the 2 hosts, the victim and the attacker. Not only that, but we also know that it's PS exec traffic. So we have a snort signature for it. We have a bro script for it, those things. The UAC portion, in this case, it's not the UAC bypass. It's, the Windows events, the 4624 and things like that. Now, the connection that you have between the network and those events is that usually there's an IP address in them, or at least the host name. It tells you source and destination, so you can map those 2 sources out. And then we go to the host. The host is going to give you a username, the host name, its current IP address, and other information. And that's how you kind of start melding them together. And it's really complicated, and there's a ton of shit to do. So rather than do that, let's make it easy. We are going to do a quick one-off. This is my correlation, or instead of correlation page. This is just a simple, who took biology in high school, right? You remember that stupid 4x4 square you had to do for how plants germinate? AA, AB, BA, BB, that crap? That's this, right? I'm finding the correlations, and I'm basically building a grid of stuff. And that's how I explain it very simple and easily to the lower tier analysts, which help get them into that cycle of trying to figure out not just is this bad or not bad, but how does it relate and connect to what they're commonly working with right now. And you can apply that not just at the tier 1 level, but the same methodology goes through all the different tiers. That's you building your foundation, that's you building your security program for both blue team and red team, right? You have that foundation and framework now that can be applied to many different venues. But to be very specific, this is me going through and trying to detect this stuff. Yes, that is a small screenshot from one of my company's products. I did that because it has visualization. I could have probably used GraphViz and manually coded it myself, but I'm lazy. So what this is looking for is, here's the 2 hosts. 100 is the initial victim that I compromised through the putty. 104 is the one that I PS exec'd into. And then on my longer talk that I do, I actually show you doing the direct route through 104 to hit different systems in that same network. That match is actually just a bro notification. So as part of the bro script, when you have a hit on it, what it does is it creates an entry in the bro notice log. So that mixed with the bro identifier, you can actually go across your 50 different bro sources and see all the different activity for that one event, that one transaction that happens. So in this case, that's kind of what I flagged on. I see these 2 systems which are connected via that bro notice log, the source and dest IPs. And that tells me that here in the red, you're seeing the IPC path being used between that source and that destination. That tells me that the admin share was being used between those 2. Now, that gives me an idea of this is suspicious, it could possibly be malicious, but that's where I need to start drilling down and figure out, well, why does this matter? So I can go to those systems, right, using PSExec if I want to, or some other tool, and say, is the PSExec service installed on these systems? If so, I know PSExec was used, because it leaves that kind of trail behind. There's a way to delete it, but most people don't. Then what I can do is I can go into that that service that got installed on the system, and then I can find the path that it ran to. And on some of the other tabs, it actually gives me the user SID that applied. Not the username, because that's human readable and useful, but the the SID of the user. What you see there is, just a simple WMI command that tells me the human readable name and associates it to the SID. And that's going to show me that these two systems were involved in an admin share. The bro notice log went off and told me that my bro script has detected something that looks like PSExec traffic. I can now go to those two systems and confirm there's PSExec activity on them and what user was in charge of that PSExec activity. And if you remember when we go back, the user that we ended up leveraging for this was B. Johnson. Now I'm going to hold my dirty comment about that. But the idea is the same. You're all right there with me. Thank you. And what we're able to see there is now we have full attribution, right? We know that these systems were compromised. We know what user was compromised and being used for these attacks. And the last thing to say is kind of, was this supposed to happen, right? B. Johnson's a user, but are they, your IT admin? Was he trying to do support? Those are things that I cannot tell you are good or bad because they're different about every single environment, right? You should have a list of known systems that are allowed to do remote like this with PSExec stuff and known users that are allowed to do it and ban it for everyone else, right? It's the whitelist versus blacklist approach. My analogy for that is always like your AV vendor versus your whitelisting software, but it actually goes back further than that, right? All the way back to medieval times and even further. What did you do for security? Well, you have your castle, and in the front of it, at the gate, you have guards. Now, when you go up to them and say, I want to get in, are the guards going to look at the list and say, well, you're not on the list. Go right in. No, that's AV, that's your blacklist approach. Only known bad doesn't get in. You need to go back to the physical security model of, you're not on my list, you're not getting in. And that's the whitelisting proactive approach. If it's not explicitly allowed, don't freaking allow it, right? That helps you stop the unknown bad from happening in your environment. And kind of from that methodology, I've got my usual motto: flag it, tag it, and bag it. That's the double tap for anyone that's seen Zombieland, right? You want to mark your shit, right? That's you flagging it, right? Something weird happened. Then you want to tag it as, this has happened commonly, this is uncommon, whatever tags you want to associate it with. It's that IT user, or it's not the IT user. And then you want to bag that. You want to rip that crap off your network. And that's, not the APT, let it, see what they do and all that. That's a different methodology. This is the scorched earth practice. So, questions? Yes? Yeah. All right. So the question for people that couldn't hear is that earlier, I mentioned MFA logs, multi-factor authentication logs, and kind of how those impact. What's nice about MFA is that's usually something you have and something you know. So it's much more difficult for the attacker to have both. I can steal your phone, but I might not know your password, kind of stuff. In my example, from what I've done previously, we've done stuff with Duo, RSA, and a couple other things like that. And how we do the detection of if something was legitimate goes into the software application that was used, the user, and the time. So what we're looking at are things of creating a baseline. What are the normal working hours for this user? And did a authentication attempt happen after hours? That kind of raises its suspicious level. But that's not a reason on its own to go after it. Then you kind of look at some other things. Duo has been a pain in my ass for the reason of if you use your Duo authentication as part of like your DevOps cycle where you have it coded in for think like WinSCP, you're trying to connect to your Amazon instance and you are transferring data from it. You're using WinSCP because you have a Windows computer. And then you close the WinSCP window. Well, fun story. That doesn't end the connection. So it'll constantly try to re-authenticate through Duo. but all the users getting this bunch of text messages about duos trying to authenticate, and they keep saying no, 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 and now you have a log of 2,000 duo authentication attempts. So it's all about trying to find the attribution, the MFA stuff, the hours surrounding it, and the systems involved. For each one of those stages is how you kind of give it a score. And if it's above your threshold, that's where you start saying suspicious. We need to actually further investigate it. I hope that kind of answered it. Cool. Anyone else? Cool. Well, thanks for your time, guys.